found this really cool quote online. I like it a lot, and it goes like this. When a resolute young fellow steps up to the great bully of the world and takes him boldly by the beard, he's often surprised that it comes off in his hand, and that it was only tied on to scare away the timid adventurers. Ralph Waldo Emerson. It's a great quote, but there's one problem. Ralph Waldo Emerson didn't say it. It's a quote by Oliver Wendell Holmes from his book Elsie Venner, A Romance of Destiny. When a resolute young fellow steps up to the great bully of the world and takes him boldly by the beard, he is often surprised to find it comes off in his hand, and that it was only tied on to scare away timid adventurers. What's going on here? Why is it when you search for this quote online, you get almost 100% returns for Emerson? The internet insists that this quote belongs to Emerson, but if you do a search on rwe.org, which houses the complete works of Emerson, you'll see the quote is nowhere in his writings. Is the internet lying to us? Maybe, but maybe not. It could be that this quote has entered into the tradition of the far and near of quoting. In order to understand what this is and why it happens, we first have to ask ourselves, what is a quote? In her book, Why Do We Quote?, Irish social anthropologist Ruth Finnegan gives us examples of places where we might find quotes. Now, of course, we quote written words from books all the time, but don't we also quote songs? Oh, I get by with a little help from my friends. Movies?
I'll be back.
TV shows?
Nothing for you! Come back 1 year!
Religious texts?
The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want.
Conversations?
Sharing is a bunch of bull, too. And helping others. And what's all this crap I've been hearing about tolerance?
Your ideas are intriguing to me, and I wish to subscribe to your newsletter.
Wisdom and proverb sayings?
Do or do not. There is no try.
Family sayings?
Almost as stupid as a stupid does.
Playground rhymes?
Miss Mary Mac, all dressed in black.
And even advertisements.
Hello? Where's the beef?
And let's not forget all the idioms we have in our English language, like better safe than sorry, or beggars can't be choosers, or you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, so you'll have to give him the benefit of the doubt. And what about where we use these quotes? Sure, we use them in conversation, but quotes are also on signs, memorials, advertisements, posters, greeting cards, memes, mugs, plates, pennants, water bottles, hourglasses, bracelets, keychains, pillows, calendars, and even bathroom stalls. Quotes are everywhere. But where did they come from? I mean, like originally, way back. Well, they've always come from people, of course. The people around us and who come before us. One of the oldest books of quotes comes from the 3rd century. It was a collection called Cato's Distichs. Now, no one really knows for sure who Cato was, but this collection of distichs, or coupleted sayings, has been in print in one form or another since the late 3rd century. That makes it one of the oldest books still in publication, going on 1700 years. That's on par with the Bible. There are more of these old books of quotes as well. There was Thomas of Ireland's Manipulus Florum from 1306. Dictics and Sayings of the Philosophers, printed in English in 1477 from a translation of Arabic, written in 1053. In 1500, the humanist Erasmus printed a book called Adagia, or Adages. These proverbs and wise sayings from ancient philosophers, it was reprinted 27 times in Erasmus's own lifetime. These books and others were used in schools to teach reading and as books of moral truths to live by. They were like the New York Times bestsellers of their day. But to find the oldest printed quote, you have to go way back. Like way, way back. To somewhere between like 2000 and 3000 BC. Some of the oldest written texts we have are on clay tablets found in Sumer. And what did the ancient Sumerians feel needed to be written down? Quotes. So let's find out, what important proverbs and sayings did the ancient Sumerians need to remember? Well, there are ones like, a lie multiplies 7 times. That's a good one. The pleasure of a daughter-in-law is anger. Actually, collections of quotes are among some of the oldest literature from around the world. From China to Java, India to Israel, each culture seems to have its collection of collected phrases that have come passed down from the centuries. Of course, all these quotes started off by being shared orally. Generation after generation of people would pass on wisdom sayings, songs, ethics, meditation, spirituality, even humor. Like in the Zambian hospitality quote that goes like this: "The rump of the visitor is made to sit upon." Passing on quotes in oral form still happens today. Take the playground, for example.
TBGB sitting in a tree. KISSING. Shut it, Connie. I only like tennis ball in a platonic way.
I used to say that on the playground. Well, not the rhyming part about the tennis ball, but the other part. And that was over 30 years ago, and my kids still come home from school today saying that exact same rhyme. We didn't teach it to them, and they didn't learn it at home, and they didn't read it in some sort of schoolyard taunting and teasing handbook. For decades, it's just been passed down from kid to kid to kid, and making someone get mad and someone else get sent to the principal's office. Quotes just live in the ether around us. They're wound through all that we do. And what about the weird little floating marks that enclose a quote? We call them quote marks and assume that they've always existed, but they haven't. In fact, the configuration of the quotation mark that we use today didn't even come into common use until the 18th or even 19th century. Quote marks started as something called a diple in ancient Greek. It was an arrowhead mark in the margin of a document. It was there to point out something in the text that came from another source, a quotation. Almost all texts at that time were read aloud. The diple cued the reader to take a breath and maybe even change their voice a little bit.
I just wondered, Mickey. Here you go, Minnie, said Goofy. Your surprise gift from Mickey.
Over the centuries, that diple mark had an incredible journey. Different writers with different styles would change the mark little by little. Different cultures would pick up on it and use their own styling. Ruth Finnegan describes the journey of the diple this way. They came as dots, single, double, multiple, as squiggles, curves, horizontal lines, double or single S-like flourishes, R-shapes, V or Ys, with or without dots, a diple turned on its head, a cross, double or single comma-like curves, a single or double horizontal strokes, sometimes with dots above and below, sometimes in red, and yet other permutations. In English, the diple finally landed as the double apostrophe at the beginning and at the end of a quote. But even that isn't always followed. Sometimes a single apostrophes are used, or dashes, or really whatever an author wants, especially in poetry or creative writing. And around the world, it seems that there are as many different ways to show quotation marks as there are languages. So, why do we quote? Well, we as humans like to collect things. From Pez to parking cones, humans have always amassed things around them that take on meaning to them. Quotes take on the best and sometimes the worst of who we've been and help us precisely say what needs to be said about it. Quotes help us summarize our ethics, our beliefs, our humor, our wisdom or mistakes. They give us inspiration and critique. They help us create new intellectual creations. In fact, this quote says it well. Our debt to tradition through reading and conversation is so massive, our protest or private addition so rare and insignificant, that in a large sense, one would say there is no pure originality. All minds quote. Old and new make up the warp and woof of every moment. There is no thread that is not a twist of these two strands. By necessity, by proclivity, and by delight, we all quote. And you know who said that? Ralph Waldo Emerson. And he actually did say it. It's in his essay, Quotation and Originality. So is there no originality anymore? Are we just quoting machines? Regurgitating the words of the past to make sense of the present? This gets us back to the far and near of quoting. This idea from Dr. Finnegan transforms quoting from a simple exercise of condensing past wisdom into something alive and moving. This is how she says it in her book. For quoting is not just regurgitating chunks of text or keeping them on a library shelves, but taking them to your own voice, and in that act declaring a perspective on them. The quoted transformed. Words cannot avoid their enactor's voice. Here then is the enchanted transformation of quoting, at once now and past, here and distant, self and other, near and far, the same and not the same. So, the quote that started us off on this whole journey now takes on a double role of sorts. It inspires us to take hold of the false beards and pull them off, exposing in this case that the internet got it wrong when it attributed this quote to Emerson and not to Holmes. We're encouraged to investigate, to study, and to learn more. But having this quote misattributed online also means the sentiments of the quote are even more universal. It originally started out as a line by Holmes describing a self-made man, someone who pulled themselves up by their own bootstraps. Somewhere along the line, someone mistakenly thought that this quote was from Emerson. They passed on that incorrect information. But the quote itself lived on. In fact, it kind of grew in popularity. It got reinterpreted through a lens. This quote has gone on to inspire people not to give up, to dig deeper into truth. It's been given new meaning and context. It lives both in the far and the near of our collective consciousness. And that's the beauty of the human language. It's adaptable, it's flexible. It can be said one way, heard another, and repeated in yet another. Things said in the past can now take on meaning in the present and be used again differently in the future. It's a beautiful, fluid lexicon of thoughts and perspectives. So, in the true spirit of this grand experiment called the human language, I'd like to end with a quote. And as always, thanks for watching.